Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Core Studio. Welcome to the show. So, on today's episode, I've got a special treat for you, and it's a very cheap treat. Yeah, it's, I mean, I'm not saying that it's like a cheap, I'm like, I bought this from like, oh, it's on discount, here you go. No. I have a treat for you in that it is a budget deck that is only 85 cents. Yeah, that's right. Again, like on all my episodes, essentially most of my deck decks, yeah, those are going to be, you know, decks that have every single card in the deck less than $1. And this entire deck is less than $1. Okay, I guess I should say a slight asterisk there. Yeah, the basic lands are not included in that cost, but literally, if you already have those, or if LGS gives them to you, or if your friends give them to you, there you go. The rest of the deck is literally 1 cent per card outside of the commander, and yeah, the commander is included in that overall cost of 85 cents. So, yeah, if you're interested in this one, make sure you check out that deck list link in the description below, and now let's jump into it, and I can't believe I'm saying this because I didn't realize Eudora is now incredibly budget friendly. I mean, when this was sort of spoiled a while back, I mean, I'm pretty sure it was a couple dollars at least for the card with a reprint or so. And actually, this is why I'm showing this version of the card. This is actually the cheapest version of the card, and I absolutely love this version. I love the art. Yeah, I love the showcase version of this one. So I'm happy this one's only 23 cents. So there you go. It's a 5/5 Treefolk Druid that costs 4 and a green that says, whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may return to the battlefield face down under its owner's control. It's a forest land. It has no other types or abilities. So, basically, all of our creatures in our deck have the potential to be trees, which is kind of... has anyone ever seen that Captain Planet, like, college humor thing with Don Cheadle that is terrifying but hilarious? Yeah, make sure you check that one out. Tree. Yeah, make sure you check that out at some point. That's basically what we're going to be doing. We've got creatures in the deck, an absurd amount of creatures in the deck, and we can ramp with our creatures because, well, when they're in play, great, we can utilize them, we can swing with them, we can do other things with them, and then when they die, well, they're not gone forever because, you know what, we just planted them in the ground as a tree. So now we can utilize them for ramp, essentially. Every single one of our creatures is basically, hey, an additional land eventually. It's kind of like whatever that Dryad Arbor, essentially, kind of, but different because they're not so many creatures. They're just going to be lands. Regardless, our opponents are going to be ramping us if they are taking out our creatures. And of course, with the absurd amount of ramp that we're going to be getting to, the absurd amount of mana that we're going to have, got a lot of effective ways to use that mana. So, of course, on an episode like this, again, I'm going to take you through all the cards. I'm going to take you through, well, the tactics and how we're going to win with the deck and how the deck works. I said that in reverse from what I usually said, so I'm slightly thrown off already. Regardless, like I said earlier, incredibly budget-friendly, just 85 cents. If you are interested in it, check out that deck list, link in the description below. And now with all that said, let's jump into tactic number 1. And this tactic I'm calling Small But Mighty, and I'm so sorry, wait for his bobble. You unfortunately, yes, now are, I mean, not unfortunately, you're budget friendly. You're incredibly budget friendly, but you're not budget friendly enough for this because all these cards again are 1 cent. And first up, we've got our Goathian Sprite, a card that is overlooked in the entire set of, you know, Phyrexia all will be 1 because, well, it doesn't have really that many applications in a format like Commander, but with a deck like this, it is perfect. A 2/2 fairy for 1 and a green. So just a 2/2 for 2. It also can't be blocked by artifact creature, so that's nice. It can get through on certain opponents because of that. And also, pay 7, put 2 counters on it. Now again, I don't think you understand the massive amounts of mana that we might have, you know, when this game keeps going and going and going. The more creatures we get into play, the more mana we're going to get when those creatures actually get dealt with. So we can just dump absurd amounts of mana into things, and this can actually be a very big, heavy hitter for us. Speaking of which, we've got Attendant Socialite, a 2/1 elf druid for 1 and a green. When another creature enters battlefield under control, you get a counter, or sorry, it gets +1 until end of turn. Again, we're gonna have an absurd amount of mana. We can drop an absurd amount of creatures into play at once, and this can hit pretty hard once we get things going. Moving on, Devarkin? Devkarin? There we go. Devkarin? Whatever. Dissident, a 2/2 that has pay 4 and a green, +2/+2 until end of turn. So we can pump this again. An outlet for our mana can be fantastic for this deck. And a similar way, we've got Oran Reef Invoker. Even more mana, but an even bigger pump effect. A 2/2 for 2 that says, pay 8, it gets +5/+5 and trample until end of turn. Yeah, we can dump a lot of mana into this. This can be a very hard hitter. And again, these are creatures who can get down early. And when they are dealt with, again, just basically pretend they're a rampant growth, right? 1 and a green. They die, they're a forest, basically rampant growth. Next up, Stonewood Invoker, a 2/2 elf mutant, pay 7 in a green, gets +5/+5 until end of turn. So very similar to that last one, basically. Again, a great way again to pump this. Yeah, I remember this from my childhood. This I think is like an Odyssey or Onslaught. Regardless, anyways, next up we've got Bear of Memory. 3/2 for 3 mana, but we can pay 5 and a green to put a counter on target enchantment creature against trample until end of turn. This isn't the only enchantment creature, and yeah, even if it is, hey, just keep getting more and more counters on it, help it hit harder and harder. Moving on, Direwolf Prowler, a 2/2 that has pay 1 and a green, gets +2/+2 until end of turn, and haste, activate only once each turn. So the turn we get this down, we can actually swing for a decent amount. Next up, here, Heir of the Ancient Fang, a 2/3 that has enters the battlefield effect. When it enters the battlefield, it comes to play with a +1 counter on it for each modified creature. And yeah, we've already talked about a couple of creatures that come into play with counters or can get counters. And yeah, we're going to have other creatures that can be modified too, so we can get a good amount of counters on this. Speaking of counters, Atom Wheel Acrobats. Whenever you roll a 1 or 2, put that many counters on it, and pay 2 and a green to roll a 6-sided die. So yeah, spin the wheel, roll the die. Get counters on this, make it hit harder than it should be able to. Next up, Kavu Primarch. Either a 3/3 for 4 mana, or a 7/7 for, slightly more than 4 mana. It's got Convoke as well. We can kick it for 4, and yeah, comes into play with 4 counters on it if we do so. And finally, we've got Sabertooth Mauler, a 3/3 that says, beginning of your end, if a creature died this turn, put a counter on Sabertooth Mauler, untap it. Again, our creatures are going to be dying because we're going to be swinging with them. We're going to be aggressive with them. When that happens, this gets bigger, this untaps. It's kind of like a pseudo form of vigilance as well. And keep in mind, yeah, our creatures do die, and then we can have them come back and play as forest too. So they still do get that, death trigger technically as well. Moving on, let's move on to tactic number 2, though, with some more awesome creatures with active lifestyle. These can be creatures that have activated abilities. Fidias Seer, a 1/1 that has tap, draw a card, reveal it. If it's a land card, discard it. Okay, so this can actually get us cards into our graveyard if we need to. Get certain things and get things out of our graveyard. And also, yeah, hey, get some lands in your hand. Hit your land drops and also your creature drops, which are now land drops as well, basically. Next up, Humble Naturalist. This one can help us with mana before and after the fact, essentially. Tap for 1 mana of any color, spend to cast a creature spell. The vast majority of our cards in this deck are creature spells, nearly all of them, essentially. So this can help us cast creatures, and when it's dealt with, well, we can still cast creatures with it. Again, it's got to be a forest. Move on, Ixali's Keeper. We've got 7 in a green. Tap, sacrifice it. Target creature gets +5/+5 and train until end of turn. This can be a massive pump to a creature, and there are certain creatures out there that really want to get pumped. Next up, we got Predation Steward. Enters the battlefield, 2 oil counters on it. Pay 2 in a green. Tap, remove oil counter from it. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. This can be a great pump effect. Again, only as a sorcery. That's fine before combat. Get a creature larger, help them hit even harder. Moving on, Dawnheart Mentor. Enters battlefield to get a 1/1 human. Nice. Also, it has Covenant. Pay 5 in a green. Target creature control gets +3 with certain gain trim until end of turn. Activate if only you got, those creatures with 3 or more creatures, with different powers. We're going to meet that requirement. We've got an absurd amount of creatures, and yeah, a great activation for us. Next up, Gearport Guide. This one can be huge in the right situation. Pay 2 in a green. Target creature control can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less this turn. This can make a creature unblockable in certain circumstances, or force an opponent to block with a creature they don't want to block with. And again, we got some pretty big heavy hitters in this deck, so we can take out some creatures thanks to this, or get a creature through thanks to this. Next up, Crows and Restore. Tap, untap target land. We got Threshold. We can tap and untap 3 lands. So yeah, we can get a good amount of value out of this. Next up, Vegetation Abomination. I love that name. 2/2 with Death Touch. That's already just nice for a great blocker, great attacker. Tap, sacrifice it, roll a 6-sided die. Gain life, go to the result. A nice little life gain if we need to. Next up, Dawnheart Rejuvenator. Tap, add 1 of any color. Nice. Again, a mana dork. Enters battlefield, gain 3 life. Nice. Just a good amount of value. Moving on, we've got Garenbane Carver. It has Adventure. We can give target creature +2/+2 until end of turn, or it can just be a 3/2. Regardless, both ways can really help us out. Next up, Jukai Preserver. Enters the battlefield to get a counter creature control. Nice. Also, we can channel it away if we need to. Discard it. +1/+1 counter reach up to 2 target creatures you control. So again, we can make some creatures into some pretty big, heavy hitters. Speaking of which, Argivian Avenger. Pay 1 until end of turn. It gets -1/-1 of your choice of flying, vigilance, death touch, or haste. A lot of good options there. Again, if we want to get through, flying. If we want to make it deadlier, death touch. Make it swing, vigilance, haste, swing right away. So yeah, a lot of great options. And then finally, we got Aberration. Aberration taps for 3, so it can be a great massive ramp effect, and it can hit decently hard again as a 4/5 that, of course, we've got plenty of other ways to pump. And if we really need to get a forest, sure, we can get a forest with it. Next up, though, let's move on to tactic number 3, which I'm calling Around the Block. And yeah, it's going to talk about, blocking and how to, well, maybe screw up our opponent's blocks. So we've got Fang of Shigeki, a 1/1 death touch for 1. So very low to the ground again. if this is dealt with, basically just 1 mana ramp spell. It's incredible, but also a great attacker, a great blocker as well. Next up, Harvest Tide Sentry, a 3/1 that says, beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, it can't be blocked by creatures power 2 or less. So again, we can cause problems for our opponents when they can't block this with, just chump blocking it. They're going to have to actually block it with something legitimate, and we can cause problems when that happens. Next up, Riveteer's Decoy. It must be blocked if able, and we can blitz it in for some extra value as well. So again, if an opponent only has 1 blocker, and we want to maybe get something else through, we can swing this and then that at them as well. So a lot of ways to mess with our opponent's blocks. We can also help our own blocks, though, with Snare Spinner, a 1/3 with reach, and whenever block creature flying gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So again, it can take out some bigger flyers than it should be able to. Speaking of which, High Rise Sky Souljack, basically the exact same thing, but it's a 2/3 for 3, and also Netcaster Spider, a 2/3 for 3. It does the exact same thing, basically. Next up, we've got Taunting Arbor Mage. This one has Kicker for 3. When it enters the battlefield, it was kicked. All creatures able to block target creature must be able to. So essentially, hey, yeah, block this tiny little Death Touch creature. Great. But I'm going to send through my entire army at you, and you're going to get trampled. Not trampled, because you don't have to. You're going to get hit by all those creatures and be able to take them out. Next up, Thin Clade Fugitives. Can't be blocked with creature's power 2 or less, and we can encore it back out. A really heavy hitter with 7 power. So yeah, our opponents really can't chump block this. And again, we encore it. We're going to be swinging at all of our opponents with something like this from our graveyard. So again, there are times when you can choose to get a creature in your graveyard instead of actually having it as a land if you need to do that. Also, Sky Scythe Engulfer, our last card in this tactic. 6/6 Reach Trample for 6 mana. Can't be blocked by creatures with flying. So if we're playing against, that opponent's Talrand deck, sorry, your flyers can't block this. You better block with Talrand or not at all. So yeah, we can get through on a lot of players with something like this in the right scenario. Next up, though, let's move on to tactic number 4, which I'm calling Helping Hands with creatures that, well, can help us out in different ways. First up, we've got Eager Construct. It's so cute. Look, it's like, here, I got this bowl for you. Regardless, a 2/2 for 2. Enters the battlefield, this player can scry 1. So again, some nice card selection with that. Next up, Papercraft Decoy, a 2/1 that says when it leaves the battlefield, you can pay 2 if you do draw a card. So yeah, when this dies, we can pay that 2. We can draw a card. And again, it's going to come back as a forest. Nice. Moving on, Blood Servitor, 2/2, enters the battlefield, create a blood token. Basically, utilize that to rummage. Pay 1, tap, discard a card, draw a card. Moving on, Chrome Cat enters the battlefield. Very simply, scry 1. So we get to scry 1 this time, not our opponents, which is going to be very nice. Again, good card selection. And then we've got Eccentric Farmer. Yeah, quite eccentric, but making pumpkins and centipedes and whatnot. 2/3 Human Peasant for 3, enters the battlefield, mill 3, then you may return a land from your graveyard to your hand. So again, a way to get some things into our graveyard. Again, we've got certain ways to get it back. And then also, yeah, being able to get lands out of our graveyard. This is a great way to essentially say, you know what? Yeah, we've got ways to get our land drops too. Moving on, we've got Jalem Tome, one of our few non-creatures in this deck. Pay 2, tap, draw a card, discard a card. A great looting effect for us. Then we've got Nantuko Shaman, a 3/2 that has enters the battlefield. If you control no tap lands, draw a card. So if we've got, an Elvish Aberration, I keep saying aberration in play, we can tap, for 3 mana to actually get this in play. Or we can spend this essentially for, 2 in green. Spend 1. When this enters the battlefield, then we can draw a card, as long as we don't have those lands tapped, which we won't. Moving on, we've got Draga Visionary. We don't have any requirement for this one. Just simply, when it enters the battlefield, we draw a card. Then finally, we've got Deadwood Treefolk. When it enters the battlefield or leaves the battlefield, and it's got Vanishing 3, so essentially at some point, it's going to go away. When that happens, you return the target creature from your graveyard to your hand. So again, there are going to be times where we say, you know what? That creature would be nice as a forest. It's about to die, but you know what? I can get it back with something else, and I'd rather have it be able to get back into my hand. We've got other ways to do that, too. We'll talk about here in a bit. But yeah, Deadwood Treefolk can be a great card in this kind of a deck. Next up, though, let's move on to tactic number 5, which I'm calling Team Players. And these creatures are, well, just all for the team. I mean, they can be for themselves, too, but all for the team. Timberland Guide is our first one. 1/1 Human Scout for 1 and a green. Enters the battlefield, put a +1 counter on target creature. So again, a way to make one of our heavier hitting creatures even heavier hitting, or even deadlier. Or, we can make this into a 2/2 for 2 if we really want to. Moving on, we've got Penumbra Bobcat. I think it's just Penumbra. Is it Penumbra? Let me know in the comments how it's pronounced. 2/1 cat for 2 and a green. When it dies, create a 2/1 black cat creature token. A good amount of value again for a creature, especially when it dies. We get a replacement essentially. And yeah, the original one is now going to be a land, which is just great. Next up, we've got Elder Leaf Mentor, which when it enters the battlefield, simply we get a 1/1. Nice, comes in with a friend. What's not to like about that? Then we've got Nylea's Huntmaster to round out this tactic. This can be a massive bump effect. 4/3 Centaur Shaman enters the battlefield. Target creature control gets +X/+0 until I'm turn. X your devotion to green. Again, we've got certain creatures that maybe have trample, maybe can't be blocked by certain other creatures, can get through on our opponents. And this can be a massive pump effect. Again, our devotion to green is going to be absurdly large with this kind of a deck. But now let's go on to our next tactic, which is tactic number 6, which I'm calling Life is Good, and it most definitely is with a deck like this. Again, only 85 cents. Have I said that before? Regardless, Bottle Gnomes, let's start with that. A 3/3 Golem with Trample. That costs 4, and again, with that Trample, hey, we've got plenty of ways to pump this, ways to get through for damage, and also when it dies, you gain life equal to its power. So if we are pumping it, we can gain an absurd amount of life with this if it gets taken out. Moving on, we've got Hill Giant Herd Gorger, that's a name, for a 7/6 giant for 4 green. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life, so a good amount of power on this, and again, just some nice initial life gain to pad our life total. And finally, we've got a 6/6 Ravenous Lindworm for 4 green. Enters the battlefield, gain 4 life. So again, just some nice ways to pad our life total while also, you know, having some pretty heavy hitters for us. Next up, speaking of heavy hitters, or ones that can become heavy hitters, let's go on to tactic number 7. Which I'm calling Swing, Swing, Swing. You like that All-American Reject song? I think that was that. Regardless, a 2/2 Wolf is going to be Sporeback Wolf for 1 in a green that says as long as it's your turn, it gets +0/+2. So this one really encourages you to just swing with it. Hey, if it's your turn, I've got some extra toughness, just swing through with me. Next up, we've got Bird Admirer, which is, I think, ironic. I don't know. There's birds, but also a hunter. I don't know. Anyways, a 1/4 reaching Daybound Human Archer Werewolf for 2 in a green. This one flips over, obviously, if no one casts a spell during their turn, and it flips over to Wing Shredder, a 3/5 Werewolf with reach and, well, Nightbound because it flips back. But yeah, a very efficient, very effective creature, again, that can help us out in a lot of situations. Next up, we've got Juggernaut. Very simple, very effective. 5/3 Juggernaut that attacks each combat of Fable and can't be blocked by walls. So if you are playing against your opponent's Arcades the Strategist deck, this is getting through against them most of the time. And yeah, again, just a good amount, you know, of aggression with this kind of a card is never a bad thing, especially when we do get a benefit when it does die. Next up, Lattice Blade Mantis, 4/3 Phyrexian Insect for 3 in a green. Enters battlefield, 2 oil counters on it. Whenever it attacks, we can move one of those oil counters from it. If we do, we untap and it gets +1 until end of turn. So again, being aggressive with this one is going to be a good thing. We can then keep it back for blocking essentially, and it can hit slightly harder the first couple of times. Next up, Tireless Hauler, another Daybound creature, 4/5 Vigilance. On the front side, it flips over to the back side, is a 6/6 with Vigilance, so it helps hit even harder. Pretty efficient, pretty effective, and again, yeah, just being able to help us be aggressive. Then we've got Kazandu Stomper, a 6/5 Trampling Beast for 5 in a green. This one's really interesting in this deck. When it enters the battlefield, return up to 2 lands you control to their hand. Basically, again, this does not force us to bounce any lands back to our hand. It is not de-ramping us. It does not require that. It says up to 2, so it could be 0 if we want that to be. But if we do have some really good creatures that turned into lands, and we've got enough lands in play, and we're like, you know what? I like those creatures back. Get them back in your hand and reuse them. So yeah, this can be a really interesting and spicy way to utilize our creature lands. Next up, we've got Rock Spummler, a 6/3 that enters battlefield with a shield counter on it. It's got trample as long as it's got that shield counter on it. So be aggressive with this, get some damage through, and protect it in combat that first time, essentially. Or more than one time if it's not damage or our opponents don't want to block it, it's got to be able to get through. Next up, we've got Hunting Pack. Again, we don't have many non-creature spells in this stack. This is a fantastic one. It says create a 4/4 green beast creature token for 5 and a green, or 5 green, and instant speeds of 7 mana in total, but it does have Storm. And again, we've got access to an absurd amount of mana, so cast spell after spell after spell in a turn and get a massive army out of, well, nowhere, essentially. So yeah, a good way to flood the board with creature tokens. But now that we've talked about our strategy, let's talk about some ways to throw a wrench into our opponent's strategies. Talking about tactic number 8, Wrenches, which I love that name for a tactic like this. Here we go. Universal Solvent, a simple 1 mana card that has pay 7 tap, sacrifice, destroy target permanent. Again, mana is going to be no issue for us. And yeah, just having this in play can be a good deterrent with certain opponents. Being like, hey, if you come at me with that giant creature, I'm going to take it out. So again, it can be a good deterrent or just a good panic button when something does hit the field that we need to deal with. Next up, Epic Confrontation. Speaking of dealing with things, target creature control gets +1/+2 until end of turn. It fights our creature you don't control. A great way to take something out. Again, we've got a lot of big, beefy creatures. Our opponents might not be so lucky. We can take out some of their biggest creatures very easily with a deck like this. Next up, Broken Wings. Destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. good, flexible way to destroy, well, a pesky permanent, pesky creature that has flying. Yeah, if your friend's got an Ur Dragon deck, a really good way to take something out. Next up, Fade into Antiquity. If you really need to get rid of an artifact or enchantment, this is a great one to do so. Exile target artifact or enchantment. It's goodbye permanently. I mean, there's very few ways to get it. The Rift's over, you can get it back, but most of the time, it's gone permanently. And then finally, we've got Tormod's Crypt Keeper. We've got a creature that can upside as well. 3/2 Vigilant Golem that has tap, sacrifice it, exile card to target player's graveyard. So this one can be sacrificed itself, so we can actually just turn this into a land. It's kind of like, hey, when do you want to ramp? Great, cool, do so. But also, take out someone's graveyard. So this can just be detrimental against someone who plays, self-mill, someone who plays Reanimator, a lot of different strategies that really require their graveyard. You say, nah, goodbye, and I'm going to be ramping because of that. But yeah, overall, this is a really exciting deck. Again, one that can hit pretty hard, one that can get an absurd amount of mana, and again, just 85 cents. Every single card outside the commander is just 1 cent. So it just shows what you can do with a budget even this small. So again, if you are interested in this deck, make sure you check out that deck list link in the description below. And of course, as always, thanks again, and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.